In previous tutorials, we talked about logging on to AgSpy, viewing the crop image, and accessing and using the summary graph for a site. In this tutorial, we're going to discuss viewing the moisture graph. To view the moisture graph, click on the pin of the site you wish to view, and once you see the summary graph, you will want to click on the Moisture tab. First of all, it's important to note that the detailed information shown on the moisture graph is also summarized in the information shown on the summary graph and in the crop image. So, if you wish to only use the summary graph and crop image as your sources of information, that's okay. The more detailed information shown in the moisture graph may be more than you want or need to see. You'll notice some of the same options we discussed concerning the summary graph are present here. You can choose to see certain things by clicking on one of the option boxes below the graph. The moisture graph shows a separate graph line for each sensor of the probe. The color of each line corresponds to the color of the data box shown at the right side of the graph. As you scroll over the graph, the values recorded for each sensor show in the boxes to the right. Note that the moisture graph will always show all sensors, even though some sensors are not in the active root zone. It's important to note that the probes are calibrated on 100% water and 100% air. We record the change between air and water at each sensor. The actual scaled frequency value is not all that important. The change in the slope of the graph line is what we watch. You can choose to view just certain sensors by clicking and unclicking the boxes next to the sensor depths. So for instance, we can choose to look at and compare the 4-inch sensor values against the 48-inch. For the 4-inch sensor, the peaks in the lines are irrigation or rain events. The stepping is an indication of root growth activity. We watch the shape of the curve rather than focus on a particular number. If the sensor curve continues to move downward, that layer at that sensor depth is not refilling to its potential. The illustration I've put to the right of the graph shows the concept of buckets at each 4 inches. The bucket at 4 inches is much bigger than the one at 48 inches. Look at the range of the two different sensors' graph lines. Ideally, you want to keep your buckets as full as possible. This can be affected by weather conditions such as extreme heat or irrigation systems with pumping limitations, making it difficult to keep all the buckets full. In particular, the top 6 buckets, 4 through 24 inches normally, will be the biggest and provide the most water and nutrients to the crop. For best yields, keeping these buckets as full as possible is important. The bottom 6 buckets will act as a reserve that supports the crop with additional moisture if it can't get all it needs from the top 6 buckets. That's why you will see deep rooting crops show root activity down to 48 inches. One additional feature to mention, you may use AgSpy's zooming feature to look more closely at a portion of the graph. To do so, simply highlight the area you wish to view, and the graph will zoom to show that area. This concludes this tutorial concerning the use of the moisture graph.